The Tempered Rey Dau free challenge is out, and if you want this fancy ornament, you're gonna have to clear him fast, but that might be easier said than done. AT Rey Dau is very aggressive, and leaves little openings for attacks as well as leaving these annoying lightning strikes in the wake of its attacks. So which weapon is best at fighting it? I tried clearing AT Rey Dau with every single weapon, then rated it on a tier list based on how easy it was for me to clear. Throughout the video, I'll include the tips and tricks I learned to clear it quickly, including the fact that if you want to beat Rey Dau fast, you might not actually want to hit the part of him that deals the most damage. Weird, right? But wait, before the hunt even begins, there are things you can do to help your hunt along. First, you can make a set with Item Prolonger and use attack buffs such as Might Seed, Demon Powder, and Demon Drug. Also, if you're planning on soloing it, make sure you go to the multiplayer settings and turn off support hunters. I accidentally kept them on at first, and they make the challenge much harder because they scale up the monster HP and don't do much damage themselves. Remember that AT Rey Dau always spawns in the same area. The closest camp is in Area 16, the Bone Desert, right here. If you haven't set it up, you should go ahead and do that. There's a rock in this area that always does 1,777 damage, which is 5% of its total health. Most monsters have some kind of random health variation, but not AT Rey Dau. But anyway, the footage and times from this video are gonna be from the AT Rey Dau event, not the challenge, which allows you to capture. You must slay in the challenge, so it might be a couple of minutes slower, but otherwise, it's the exact same. Let's get started. And sorry if I sound sick, because I am. Okay, as previously mentioned, AT Rey Dau is super fast and does not leave you large openings to attack. And while the hammer's individual strikes aren't exactly slow, most of the damage is locked up behind this, the mighty charge slam. It's kinda hard to find time to do this on AT Rey Dau, and right now hammer doesn't really do that much damage, so it's kind of in a tricky spot. But fortunately, it's gonna be buffed at the end of May. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to clear this challenge before that buff. So since there aren't many large openings, we're just gonna have to make our own. Hitting Rey Dau's vulnerable head into a mighty charge slam is fantastic, and if we hit the head enough, we can KO it multiple times per hunt to give us huge openings. Despite that, I still found it really hard to squeeze out enough damage to clear Rey Dau quickly, so I'll have to put hammer in D tier. But of course, hammer is not the only weapon that's good at KOs. We also have the hunting horn, which is my main. Like the hammer, the individual attacks aren't that slow. Also like the hammer, the more damaging moves are pretty high commitment and they require a fairly large opening, which Rey Dau, of course, does not want to give. But there's a much bigger problem with hunting horn. See, a big source of damage from the hunting horn comes from these echo bubbles that are placed on the ground. And Rey Dau does this thing where it likes to jump off the bubbles and just go somewhere else. How can you make it stay on your bubbles? Well, using flash pods very liberally is one way. You can flash it up to 3 times to make it fall while in the air. And every weapon will want to use these flash pods because while it's flying around the air, you can't hit it with a melee weapon. But with hunting horn in particular, you actually want to time these flashes so that it falls back onto your echo bubbles. I also tried KOing and using the offset melody to keep it from moving around and still on those bubbles, which sort of works, but unfortunately it's just not a very reliable strategy. So I'll put hunting horn in D tier. I know that if you look at my final hunting horn time, it actually isn't super slow, but that's mostly because it's my main, and also I had to try a whole bunch of times to get this time. It's just not consistent. But speaking of offsetting, there is one weapon that is particularly good at it. The Greatsword. It has a fantastic offset that is always available, unlike the hammer and hunting horn. This is fantastic because the Greatsword really needs those openings. Its charge attacks just take way too long to make use of Rey Dau's tiny openings. Excuse the gameplay footage, by the way, I've never really clicked with Greatsword myself. It's just such a weird weapon, because it plays differently against every monster. With Arkfeld, the true charge strike was enough to make a stagger, so you can just spam that. Against Zoshia, you just want to be hitting focus strikes as much as you can. Against AT Rey Dau, it is offset time. And it works pretty great because Rey Dau attacks a lot, which means lots of offset opportunities. You can do it again, and again, and again, and again, and again. It really did feel like a game of trying to knock Rey Dau over so I can get 1 or 2 charged attacks off, because without that, I was simply whiffing my charged attacks. Honestly, that didn't really feel too great to me. I know it's probably a skill issue, but I'll put Greatsword in C tier. But offsetting and flashing is not the only thing you can do to topple Rey Dau. There's a weird thing about tempered monsters. In a way, they're actually easier than the non-tempered versions. They have tempered wounds that if you break, they guarantee a knockdown, unlike a regular wound where they simply stagger a bit. It's the same for Arch-Tempered Rey Dau. It's a free opening. 3 of them will randomly spawn on either the head, either wing, either leg, or the tail, and they kind of look like a whitish scar on the monster before the wound even shows up. This is weird, but at the moment the randomness only seems to occur if you play online single player. If you join any sort of lobby, the wounds seem to be fixed per account, which doesn't seem intended, but whatever. Anyhow, this randomness can make it difficult to compare runs, since some weapons definitely have an easier time hitting certain body parts compared to others. And there is also one weapon that is especially good at opening up wounds: the Gunlance. Its explosions do a fixed amount of damage no matter where they hit, so you can target any part of the body for close to full damage. This makes it very easy to open up tempered wounds on parts of the body most weapons might not want to hit normally, but there is an issue with this. While the Gunlance is really good at creating these wounds, it's not so good at popping them. Its focus attacks are pretty weak and not really worth using. Most of the time, it's better to just keep attacking. Although I still found myself using them occasionally when I really wanted to break that wound. And don't forget to use Wyvern Fire as often as possible because it's a major source of damage. So the thing about Gunlance right now is that there's one Gunlance that's very obviously better than all the others. And this is it, the Guardian Lawful Boars. And so it has been since the release of the game. It does a lot of damage, it has lots of blue sharpness, but the sharpness does eventually run out. So what should we do? Sharpen? Nah. Because you know what's better than 1 Guardian Lawful Boars? 2 Guardian Lawful Boars. Once your sharpness runs low and you've run out of Wyvern Fires, simply switch it out for another one. But anyway, even though the Gunlance is definitely capable of doing tons of damage, because the openings were so short, I had a really hard time executing that. The full burst combo and Wyvern Fire take a bit of time, so every time I tried doing them, I ended up getting hits. Not to mention, the Gunlance's main defensive tool, guarding, doesn't feel great against AT Rey Dau. If you guard an attack, sometimes you get stuck holding your shield up to guard the follow-up lightning strikes as well. So I'll give it a C tier. If you're familiar with speedrun times, this low rating might seem a bit weird. At the time of writing, the Gunlance time is actually quite fast. But remember that I'm rating these from the perspective of a non-speedrunning regular player. So even if a good, fast script exists, the Gunlance's high commitment makes it feel really difficult to execute if you're just freestyling. But anyway, is there a weapon that can solve these issues? Well, what about the Switch Axe? It's an incredible matchup against many other monsters. Its sword parry gives a hyper armor, so you don't even care about the lightning strikes, no problem. Same for the full release Slash, the Switch Axe's main source of damage. It's pretty slow, but once it gets going, it gets hyper armor, which means you can ignore any attack the monster does. And there's a bit of a problem with AT Rey Dau, because sometimes instead of attacking you, it simply decides to leave, leaving me swinging my precious full release Slash at nothing. It's very sad. But that didn't stop me from trying, and it still does a huge amount of damage. My fastest run didn't actually go too badly, but it felt really inconsistent because sometimes Rey Dau would just jump away from my attacks. It just depends on what Rey Dau decides to do. But still, I was able to get a pretty good run if I kept trying, so I'm still gonna give Switch Axe an A tier. Pretty solid. But then here's when I tried the Lance, and here is where my trouble started. Firstly, its primary defensive tactic, guarding, isn't great, as previously mentioned. When I tried countering, I would often get hit by the lightning strikes afterwards. And more importantly, ever since the Corrupted Mantle nerf, Lance just does not do very much damage right now. It's in a tough spot. If we look at Rey Dau's hit zones, its weakest body part is by far the head, so I hit that as hard as I could for maximum damage. but it still wasn't enough. It just kept flying around and not letting me hit it. I already did everything I could to knock it down. I've flashed, I've hit its tempered wounds, but it just wasn't enough. There wasn't anything else I could do. Or is there? There is actually one more way to knock it over, and that's via regular wounds on the legs. You can do this once per each leg. But if we look at the leg hit zones, it does way less damage. However, there is something we can do to fix this. One skill that's really helpful here is Mind's Eye. At level 3, it does plus 30% damage to hard targets, which is what the legs count as. This is as if we turned Rey Dau's legs from 37 hit zone to 48 for melee weapons, which is still not quite as good as hitting the head, but it's not bad at all. So I swapped it out for my razor sharp deco, which was a little sad because I had to sharpen a bunch during the hunt. It'd be better if I had an arching weapon with 2 sharpness augments, but I didn't, so oh well. But anyway, this did mean I could start consistently poking the legs for tons of damage to get 2 additional trips off those regular wounds on the legs. Remember that the tempered wounds are special, so even if a tempered wound spawns on the same spot, you can still get a normal wound there. And this worked way better than my previous attempts because of the higher uptime. It was much easier to pull off. So I'll give Lance, surprisingly, a B tier. But let's pause a minute. We talked about Mind's Eye, but there are other useful skills you can also consider on your hunt. After all, it's much easier to get a faster time if each of your attacks does more damage. That's obvious. I've been showing all the builds I used, but let's briefly go over some useful skills you might want to consider. Weakness Exploit is generally good, of course, unless you're going for a Mind's Eye strategy, which it doesn't work with, which is exactly what I did here. Whoops, because I forgot to remake the build after adding Mind's Eye. Anyway, and of course, there's the classic meta skills like Agitator, Burst, Maximum Might, and the Gore Magala set in conjunction with Antivirus. But what about AT Rey Dau set itself, the Rey Dau Gamma set? Well, the main draw is that the 3 Gamma pieces gives you 5% base raw damage, which is about 11 raw from the arching weapons, and it prevents a death, which is crazy good. As a bonus, it also has latent power. If you have latent power, once active, it grants a whopping 50% affinity and 50% stamina reduction. Keyword being once active. How do you activate it? Well, by either taking a cumulative total of 130 damage or after 2 minutes of combat time. A lot of people don't like the skill, but listen, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I don't get hit all the time. So latent power is fine for me, it activates pretty fast. Another favorite skill of mine is Counter-Strike, which at level 3 grants plus 25 raw after getting dunked on by a monster, which again, for me, happens all the time. The players that rarely get hit, yeah, you guys can pass on it, but not me. As for whether Rey Dau set bonus that extends latent power's duration, is that good? That's kind of beyond the scope of this video, but maybe I can make a video about this later. For now, let's take a look at another weapon that uses Mind's Eye really, really well. The Sword and Shield kind of unfortunately feels like a better lance. It does way more damage, and although it has less range, its mobility more than makes up for it. It also has a shield, although unlike lance, it doesn't really rely on guarding and countering. It can just slide away from all the lightning attacks. Getting to the legs is also really easy. It also has a super good and fast focus strike that for some reason, if you turn your camera all the way up, can target wounds that are high in the sky. But the thing that struck me most about Sword and Shield is just how consistent it was. It's really easy to keep hitting the legs and getting those knockdowns. For a lot of the other weapons, I had to repeat and try over and over, up to 5 times to get a halfway decent run. This was not the case for Sword and Shield. 3 runs in a row, boom, all of them around 6 minutes. So of course I'll give the Sword and Shield an S tier. But what's another weapon that's kind of similar to the Sword and Shield? The Dual Blades. It's also a small weapon that's very fast and mobile, so it should be about the same experience, right? But the big difference is, I think I'm just not very good at Dual Blades. Unlike the simplicity of Sword and Shield, I had to think about stamina, I had to think about demon gauge, I had to keep getting off those perfect dodges to make sure demon boost mode was active to make sure I got that extra 20% damage or else I'm throwing, etc. I'm just not very good at all that, and the cadence and timing of the dodges keeps changing depending on what mode you're in, which means that I kept accidentally dodging into attacks more than I want to admit. And that's not really the weapon's fault. What is the weapon's fault, however, is that for some reason it just does less damage than Sword and Shield. Not exactly sure how that makes sense because there's 2 swords instead of 1. Another drawback is that its focus attack, while extremely cool and flashy, is also very slow and not worth using most of the time. Overall, I'll give Dual Blades a C tier. I'm just getting hit way too much. Isn't there a better way to avoid these attacks? What if we simply don't get close to Rey Dau? Let's try the bow. It actually plays pretty similarly to the Dual Blades. You have to manage stamina and perfect evade, and instead of a demon gauge, you pay attention to your bow charge level. It does prefer to get in relatively close because of the spread attack, but it still has significantly more range and flexibility. It's really good at targeting specific locations for the tempered wounds as well. It generally meant that I had a much easier time staying out of the way of the follow-up lightning attacks. And it was also easier to avoid moves in general. Although I think this is a personal pet peeve, but one thing I don't like is moves that seem to come out immediately. You know, like every single one of Rey Dau's lightning shooty attacks. So while it's cool and probably optimal to perfect evade them, I'd rather just space them with flying swallow shot. Anyway, I felt like bow is pretty easy and consistent to play, so I'll give it an A tier. But what if instead of perfect evading everything, I could just say stay really far away? Which is what the light bowgun wants to do. Staying away to remain in critical distance is how you get most of your damage with light bowgun. Too close or too far and you'll be losing out on a lot of damage. You can tell you're in it by looking at the aiming reticle. Luckily, when I was this far away, a lot of Rey Dau's moves simply posed no threat to me. But anyway, due to the hit zones, shot weapons want to be mostly shooting the head, which means that we can't really make use of those leg trips. But it doesn't really matter, because no matter what Rey Dau is doing, you can just keep firing away. It's also really easy to get the rock drop with the light bowgun because I can just stand here next to this pile of grounding pods and wait for Rey Dau to land somewhere nearby, then just shoot the rock. Anyway, the light bowgun's damage loop primarily consists of trying to get into rapid mode as soon as possible by shooting pierce ammo, then spamming freeze ammo while in it. And this loop didn't feel like it did crazy damage, but it was super safe and consistent. I'll give light bowgun a solid B tier. But how would a weapon without light bowgun's mobility fare? The heavy bowgun! The heavy bowgun sacrifices all that mobility for a shield. And as previously mentioned, a shield is not really that great against Rey Dau. But it has something to make up for it, which is a lot of damage. Seriously, look at these numbers. Hard to defend, not great at hitting legs, irrelevant in the face of sheer damage output. Although one thing to keep in mind is that you do have to do a bit of preparation in advance. Make sure to stock up on freeze ammo, and also to pack some snow herbs. And make sure you have a hotkey for crafting freeze ammo as well. But if you run out, you can always go back to camp and restock. Anyway, this is bonkers damage, so obviously I'm putting heavy bowgun in S tier. And you know what other weapon does a lot of damage? The Insect Glaive. The melee weapon with some of the highest damage numbers at the cost of occasionally of having to do the chore of picking up some extracts. So I tried the same strategy of the other melee weapons, slotted in Mind's Eye, and tried targeting the legs, but was immediately met with a huge issue. The Insect Glaive's main damage source, the Rising Spiral Slash, it goes upwards. This is not hitting the legs. I mean, that kind of worked, but honestly I had much better luck simply trying to use Rising Spiral Slash as effectively as possible. But unfortunately, I was getting hit a lot doing this. I know the Insect Glaive's attacks look really fast, but you often get locked into surprisingly lengthy combos with a single input, and if you're not careful, you can get stuck swinging away while Rey Dau just swats you out of the sky. I definitely struggled a bit here, but overall, Insect Glaive still does crazy good DPS, so I'll still rate it an A tier. I know that currently Insect Glaive is actually super strong and the speedrun times are super fast, but honestly I just had a really hard time trying to copy them. But anyway, if you're looking for more cool, dramatic moves like the Rising Spiral Slash, we also have the Longsword. Helmbreaker is probably the flashiest move in the game, except stop. Don't use it unless you're absolutely sure you can max out your spirit level quickly. Fortunately, it's actually not too hard to max your spirit level by way of counters if your timing is good, because Rey Dau attacks so often. And I had better luck using the EI counter rather than Foresight Slash, since the follow-up attack to Foresight often got me hit by the lightning strikes. But yeah, instead of Helmbreaker in Wilds, the highest DPS you can do with Longsword is unfortunately just looping Crimson Slash 1 and then Spirit Blade 1, and then just keep repeating that. Not really the most exciting, but it's good and consistent damage. And Helmbreaker is still pretty good for doing a chunk of damage to a specific body part with a tempered wound, like the wings, head, or tail. As for the legs, well, I did my best to hit them, but the longsword just seems a little bit too, long? A lot of times I felt like the blade was accidentally hitting the wings or body, so I wasn't able to focus on the legs like I wanted. Still, the combo did plenty of damage regardless, so the longsword goes in A tier. So because the longsword is long, it follows that the similarly proportioned charge blade is gonna have similar issues, right? But this could not be further from the truth. Yes, the charge blade is long, but the primary damage combo is swinging in Savage Axe mode like this. Very low horizontal sweeps that are actually amazing at targeting the legs when Rey Dau is standing or on the floor. Some folks like the blast charge blade, but I happen to have a perfect paralysis charge blade, so I use that. But the important thing is to have impact file, because that means you get to KO it. And of course, I got to paralyze it too. I also got to break the tempered wound on the leg, break a normal wound on the leg, break a tempered wound on the wing, another normal wound on the leg, drop a rock on it, KO it, and para it again, all in the space of one hunt. The second para was probably helped by the fact that my cat had a para weapon, which I don't actually recommend because para is pretty bad against Rey Dau. It just doesn't trigger reliably. It might be better to use the poison Palico weapon for some extra damage instead. But anyway, including the 3 flashes, he just never moved, and clearing him was super easy. I find Charge Blade incredibly good against AT Rey Dau, so it gets an S tier. Anyway, remember that all the rankings are just based on my own opinions and personal experiences with the weapons. Just for fun, I also made a tier list ranking it based on current speedrun times, which is obviously different from my own personal one. The weapons that I found hard to execute, namely the slower ones, I tended to rate a little bit lower, and the faster ones, I tended to rate a little bit higher. If you enjoyed the video, consider breaking a tempered wound on the subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time, and I hope I'll be feeling better by then. Bye-bye!